I'm going to talk a little bit about a touchy subject, and that's Canadian Firearms and its firearms program and some of the laws and regulations that are involved with it. And the reason why is because there's been a bit of a debate going on in politics about this whole thing in Canada. I just kind of want to make this more of a public awareness video and a bit of an educational video because I feel like a lot of people actually don't know how the Canadian Firearms program works. So I want to bring just a basic knowledge for you guys to actually understand how the entire thing works. And the reason for this is because there's been a large movement towards banning handguns in Canada. It all started with John Tory wanting to ban handguns in Toronto and the GTA for the most part, and then that kind of just made a snowball effect to call for a complete ban nationwide. The reason for this is because there was a lot of gang shootings that happened in the city of Toronto, a city that I live in. Been here for almost 6 years now. I just also want to say that I'm not looking for an argument or a debate or anything like that. I'm not looking to cause anything like that. I'm just merely making this because I want people to understand some of the issues that should be brought to light with this whole topic. Going back to the whole start of this movement to ban handguns is the fact that all these gang shootings were happening in Toronto. And you can look on the news, it was reported several times with multiple of the shootings that had happened that it was all gang related. Whether the person was in a gang or used to be affiliated with one or anything like that. But you could also tell that it was very gang related because it was all targeted shootings. It was all specifically going after one or two individuals because of gang involvement. Gangs like that and members like that are criminals. That's clearly what they are. Why? Because they're using illegal guns and committing a criminal offense. That's that. Let me give you a very basic rundown of what they're proposing to do in Parliament. So, this whole ban on handguns, they're claiming that banning handguns is going to solve the problem of shootings. Now, the issue that I'm bringing to light is the fact that they're proposing a complete and full ban on handguns, including legally obtained and legally owned handguns. Now, back in the summer of 2018, Toronto Police Chief Mark Saunders reported that 50% of guns used in crimes are from domestic sources, and he claims that a lot of that is from straw purchasing. Now, straw purchasing is when you buy basically a bulk amount of guns at once, and then from there, typically, people would end up selling them. But the thing is that straw purchasing limits that greatly to just unrestricted firearms. Unrestricted being like a technical long gun, such as like a rifle or a shotgun. Now, there's different variations and breakdowns of, different rifles that are restricted and non-restricted and so on, but the basic form is just rifles and shotguns are unrestricted, so they're not registered. Restricted firearms, however, are registered to each individual owner that owns them. So the government and the RCMP have all that information of that registered restricted firearm. And restricted firearms are things like handguns, AR models, and now to make another correction, people believe that AR stands for assault rifle, and that's not true at all. It stands for Armalite. Armalite is the company that created that model of rifle. So it's essentially just the generic term for that platform of rifle because people use that AR model as a base for another type of rifle. And however, in contrary to what Mark Saunders had said, Rachel Harder, an MP from Lethbridge, Alberta, had reported to Bill Blair, and Bill Blair is former RCMP, and he's the new Minister of Organized Crime Reduction. She called him out in front of all of the House of Commons, saying that only 9% of guns used in crimes were traced back to legal owners. That's more believable than 50%. Why? Because firearms that have been used in crimes, they're not legal. Guys aren't going to commit a crime with a legally purchased and legally obtained firearm, especially one that is registered. So that it's just a direct trail to them. Mike McCormack, who is the president of the Toronto Police Association, had stated There's no way in my world or any world I know that this would have an impact on somebody who's going to go out and buy an illegal gun and use it to kill another person or shoot another person. So he's calling it right out that a handgun ban would have absolutely no effect on a criminal or the criminal element because they're not purchasing legal guns anyway, so it's going to do absolutely nothing. He also stated that it's a more complex issue and people are just looking for an easy fix. And that's exactly all it is. People that are calling for this handgun ban are just thinking that that's an easy fix to a problem that would require a lot more than that. It's going to fix nothing. And it's because criminals aren't using legal guns. They're not. They're using illegally obtained guns. A handgun ban is going to have no effect on a criminal because they don't follow the law anyway. That's why they're criminals. I am a firearms owner. I have been since 2012 or 13. I've had my license since 2012 for both restricted and non-restricted possession and acquisition. I currently own 7 right now. 3 of them are restricted, so that means they're registered to me at my place of address under my name and are only allowed to be in one of 3 places at a time, and that's at my listed place of residence, at the range that I have a membership at, or at a gun show. That's it. And then the other 4 that I have are non-restricted, so they don't qualify to be in a registry. But I do still have to keep them locked up, unloaded, and ammunition locked up and stored separately. All of that which I do. Same thing goes for the restricted firearms. You need to keep them locked up and unloaded. The process of getting a gun license in Canada is actually pretty lengthy. It starts with the firearms course, and now you can apply to do either a restricted or non-restricted or both. We did both over the course of 4 days. What it is that you have kind of like a classroom type setting when you have book work and written work to learn like more of the basic like fundamentals knowledge and stuff like that, and then there's practical where there's actual firearms unloaded and there's no shooting during the course like at all, but you learn how to use and safely operate different types of firearms. At the end of that, you have a written and a practical exam for both restricted and non-restricted, and if you fail that, well then you're not getting it. And if the instructor feels that you shouldn't be there and you shouldn't have a firearm or a firearms license, then they can deny you. So it's once you actually complete that course, then you receive the actual papers of the formal application to acquire your firearms license. And on that application are things such as you need to have a list of references, anybody that you live with, and you're subjected to a background check by the RCMP. You need to be very honest about whether or not you've had like any history of mental illnesses or anything like that. And also on that application is the reason why you want the firearms license, whether it be for work or for recreation or things like that. Once you actually fill out the application and send that into the RCMP, then they actually call all of your references and make sure that they all agree that you're of sound mind to actually own a firearms license as well as a firearm. And then if they actually deem that you're okay, then they issue your license. And at any time during this application process, the RCMP can deny you. So the actual acquiring of getting a firearms license in Canada, start to finish, takes a couple months. Like, it's not a quick process by any means. For a quick rundown of buying and selling firearms, it's definitely not like the US, and I think a lot of people in Canada have this misconception that firearms laws are the same here as they are there, and that's not true at all. And I blame a lot of that on the media for stuffing American media down Canadian throats, so it creates that misinformation. You can't just walk into a store, say, I want that AR, and then they give it to you, you buy it, and then walk out. That's not at all how it happens, or for a handgun. Whenever I went and bought an unrestricted rifle, first and foremost, it was locked in a cabinet, so I had to ask to see it. They checked my license first, then they got it out of the locked cabinet, made sure that that was the one that I wanted to purchase, and then they proceeded to write down all my information from my firearms license. Trigger lock went on it, and then I also bought some ammunition. They locked that up in a bag. They came up with me to the front and then was rung through and then was able to go. But for restricted, that's not the case at all. You're not walking out of the building with the restricted firearm. What will happen is that you'll make the purchase, they'll take down all your information, and then you'll have to go through the whole transfer process. Same thing goes with ammunition. If you ever want to actually buy ammunition, they always check your license first to make sure that you're a valid holder. Even if you want to look at a gun, they'll always ask to see your license first. And if you don't have a license, then tough shit. Buying a restricted firearm is definitely a lot different, and it's a more lengthy process. Now what happens with that is that whenever we need to change owners of a firearm, you need to initiate a transfer. So he calls the chief firearms officer to let them know that he's going to be transferring one of his firearms to another owner. Now what happens is they take down his information and see it on record, the information of the firearm that's being transferred, that's on record, and then they give him a transfer number. He then gave that transfer to me, and then I call my chief firearms officer and then give them the transfer number, confirm my information, who I'm buying it from, what I'm buying, and they ask me why I'm purchasing it. And if I have a range membership, what's the range? If that all clears, then they'll let us know when we can complete the transfer. And by that being, they'll send out a confirmation saying, okay, you are good to go, and then he can mail it to me. And then it's like a week or two after, then I'll get the slip that is the new registry for that firearm. Whenever I purchased another handgun online from a business, what happened was I made the purchase, and then they still contact the chief firearms officer, let them know who purchased it, and they already have all of my information on file because I had to submit it in order to make that purchase. They'll be able to see all my information and then confirm to them, yes, you can send it to this person, and then they'll mail it to me, and then again, the information will be sent to me about a week or two after, confirming that this firearm is now registered to me at this specific address. So again, to reiterate, the handgun ban would do absolutely nothing to solve a crime problem in Canada. Why? Because criminals are not using legally obtained guns that are registered to them. It's illegally obtained firearms that are being smuggled into the country from the States or from some other place. And the other thing too is that I don't condone any of the shootings that happen. I don't. And I don't know anybody in the firearms community that does either. It's like if you were to take every single person that had a valid driver's license and owned a vehicle and were to say, you know what? All the drunk drivers that are out there and get into accidents, you're part of the problem. Why? Because you own a driver's license and a vehicle and you're a driver, so you're part of the problem. It's the same thing as grouping us together with these insane people that have mental health issues that shouldn't even have access to a firearm to begin with. Again, which the Canadian Firearms Program would obviously red flag before they could even get the license. To group people that are part of the firearms community with those criminals, it's not the same. It's not the same thing at all. So please don't do it. The other thing too is that in the bigger picture, not to sound cruel or heartless or anything like that, but more people have died in Canada from stabbings, strangulation, car accidents than anybody that has been killed by a firearm. It's not technically as big of a problem as they're saying it is. And in all reality, they need to find a different solution, because this solution is not going to do anything. There's going to be no problem solved. They need to have more police. They need to have more thorough checks at the border and other security sections where guns can be smuggled in. They need to have a way harder crackdown on the gangs that are in metropolitan areas such as Toronto. It's not the legal firearms owners that are the problem. We follow the law. We are some of the most law-abiding citizens out there. And to blame us is ridiculous. Again, I'm wanting to inform people so that they actually understand that there is a program in effect. It's a lengthy process, and at any point, somebody can be denied getting a firearms license, let alone even attempting to get a gun. Because it's actually not easy to get a gun in Canada unless you have a license. And even then, there are regulations that you need to follow in order to acquire one. Even getting ammunition, it's the same thing. So unless you're illegally obtaining this, which in fact would make you a criminal, then it's not an easy thing to do. I'm going to attach all the links for all the information that I got below. So if you want to look up on any more of the stuff that I've talked about, then please have a look at those articles and that information just to inform you a little bit more about this subject.